We tried to be a normal talk show once. Worst 2 minutes of our lives. The Kate Daly Show starts now.
There's a political liability, which I think is something that we fail to look at because too often there's so much blowback from our intervention in areas that we shouldn't be involved in. You know, Hamas, if you look at the history, you'll find out that Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat. And you said, well, yeah, that was better then and served its purpose, but we didn't want Hamas to do this. So then we as Americans say, well, we have such a good system, we're going to impose this on the world. We're going to invade Iraq and teach people how to be Democrats. We want free elections. So we encourage the Palestinians to have a free election. They do, and they elect Hamas. So we first indirectly and directly through Israel help establish Hamas. Then we have election. Then Hamas becomes dominant. So we have to kill them.
All right. Welcome. Kate Daly Show at your service, and a special interview with Dr. Ron Paul, and I'm excited to have him again on the show. It's always a pleasure to have Dr. Ron Paul. He's one of my favorite interviews. He doesn't know that. I've been on the air for 16 years, and I have to say I've 300 interviews a year, and he's definitely one of my most favorite to interview. How are you, Dr. Ron Paul?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. Thanks.
You bet. You bet. Those comments were, I think, 14 years ago. Is that right?
I didn't do the math, but it was a couple years ago.
2009. And I want to let everyone know, of course, Ron Paul served in Congress from 1976 to 1977, 79 to 85, 97 to 2013. Those comments were made January 9th, 2009. And here we are still engaging with over 40 years of headlines from Iran. So I can't wait to talk to you about this. I can't wait to dissect what you said there, because I think it was really important. I feel like we should name this show Unpopular Thoughts. Because it's definitely unpopular to say the things that we're going to say, but truth has always been unpopular. I think it's always been in the minority. You are also a medical doctor. You are the father of Senator Rand Paul. I've actually had him on my show as well. You, my gosh, presidential candidate. I could go on and on. Everyone knows you. I'm so excited about that. I felt like you were really robbed of your candidacy for presidency, but that we'll do that another time. And I also really wanted to talk to you about those comments because when you were describing Hamas and Israel creating Hamas, that was really fascinating, very, very interesting. And I also want to know if you got any blowback from that. What was the reaction of your colleagues? But can you describe that a little bit more? Because you only had less than 2 minutes to go there when you did that in 2009.
Well, I don't remember exactly, what was said or how I felt. Sure. But I tell you, they treated me better than one might think. But I think they would treat me much worse today because I think the atmosphere is a lot different. But when you're replaying that, the thought that came to my mind, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, here we are. How much progress has there been? And I see that as a fault of our foreign policy. We don't change our foreign policy. We're richest nation in the world. We have more military power. We control the currency of the world. So therefore, we have a lot of clout, and we throw our weight around. And it happens that this administration is doing that more than any of our other administration in recent history. But it's a problem of philosophy as far as I'm concerned, and both political parties endorse interventionism and they rationalize, and conservatives, they are not conservative when it comes to looking at the Constitution and only fighting wars that are declared. So they just bend over backwards to fool the people. Yeah. But I think there's a limit to that, and I'm hoping a lot of people are waking up these days that maybe we ought to find out a little bit about this non-interventionism.
Oh, I understand. Oh, I get it. I love where you're going with this. In fact, I was reading an expose, and they were talking about how the CIA really manufactured the whole incident with the Shah. and then how they went about sort of doing these backdoor dealings to get Khomeini in, knowing that the reign would be tyrannical, right? And that Khomeini was actually coming from basic Eastern intelligence. And so it was an interesting expose because it showcased a little bit about what you were talking about with Hamas, the engineering of Hamas and the reasons for that. But then I wonder if they were pretending that it got out of control, but the CIA was actually really in control. And I wonder how much control we actually do have over Iran.
Well, fortunately, not a whole lot.
Mhm.
I think that what is happening in more recent years, in the last decade,
Mhm.
is the credibility of the people who lied to us. They've lost some credibility, and
Yeah.
that's what I think is good. Sometimes people say, "Well, the government lied to us," and I say, "Well, in a way, that's good. People are waking up.
Yeah.
If we realize they're lying to us, then we won't roll over and
Mhm.
do what the establishment says." Because the polling, we talk a lot about polling. Daniel, who works with me, he likes to analyze these pollings and the shifting of attitudes, and people do shift their attitudes, and that to me is very important. And it's there in the attitude and what the people are thinking, and it makes the difference rather than the next election. Because to win, most of the politicians think they have to compromise their position. Oh, I can't offend this group, can't offend this group. I happen to have a philosophy that says nobody should be offended with liberty.
Yes.
And once they realize what it is, and I found that to be the case when I was campaigning nationally, that people are very open-minded to this. So this is something that I think is an attitude is very, very important. But right now, if they lose credibility and people are lying, the people will be more ready to look at what is the alternative.
You know, I'm going to laugh when I say this because I'm going to know how this is going to sound, but I half expected there to be a false flag event orchestrated before they lured us into any kind of battle with Iran. But now it seems as though they went off of thought crime. They're going to do something, and they really haven't yet told us what that was even. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
And you're talking about what we're going to do or what they're going to do.
What we're doing right now. There was no false flag to draw us in as reluctant people that we try. You know, there's been a lot of false flags in history. And so they draw us into the battles that we get in because it's a tough sell to the American people, right? You just go to war with somebody. But there was no action of instigation on Iran's part. So now it was kind of left to thought crime. It almost seems like, well, they were going to do something, so we went in. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought is that it's getting harder and harder to figure out what to expect, and when something good happens, to designate it, or something bad, because I don't think they know what they're doing, and they try to get away with it. And I think this administration is one that it doesn't follow pattern. The people who are the authoritarians and the interventionists, you can sort of anticipate that it has to be an intervention of some sort. But I think it's more confusing now because we can't figure out what it is. And it's going to be hard because just what the negotiations are going on right now. They make an announcement and they said this. No, I didn't ever say that. And, I can settle that. Just come home, stay out of these stupid arguments and all this deadly weaponry that we have, and the engaging millions of people in this like we have. It makes no sense. So I think the American people, as all people are, they are receptive to people telling the truth, but you have to be credible. And I think that is the road to a better life. But right now, you can't even measure that, which is where I am, because I think there's a lot more people on our side of this issue. That's why I say, how can you be optimistic? I said, once I meet somebody or hear a program where there's a bad announcement, I said, well, we just woke up another 10,000 people. I mean, we have to do something about this. But we have to fill the vacuum. And the vacuum is, of course, the philosophy that I am sure you and I share in many ways. And that has to be the answer, because the people who are giving us so much trouble, they have a philosophy, because they are people who believe in big government, and that's where the problem is, because philosophically and emotionally they are really dedicated to the mess that they have created. It shouldn't be that tough on us. We should be doing a much better job of exposing their hypocrisy.
You know, after you made those comments, did any of your colleagues, any congressmen, any senators kind of take you off to the side and ask you about what you were saying? Or was it largely ignored when you made the comments about Hamas? What was it ignored? I mean, was anybody even curious about it?
No,
No.
not really. When you talk about them curious and asking me deep questions, the one that I joke about, and it makes a point, is, there was something called a money bomb when I was campaigning, for president, and we collected a lot of money, and this spontaneous, and we had all kinds of records. And I was in Congress and still voting, and I was after that happened, I was on the House floor, and we had a vote coming up, and somebody, I can't even remember the person's name, so it's not important. So another member, obviously a friend, and he sat down, might have been a Democrat, might have been a Republican, but we were voting on something. But his question was, how did you get that organized? How do you do this? I said, I don't know anything about internet. I said, I said, this is, well, how did it happen? And we were voting, and there was an imbalanced result. There was a bunch of people, like 300 or some number, and there was one no vote up there. So instead of me talking to this colleague of mine, I said, maybe where the secret is up on that board right now. Maybe that's who's speaking, and so it sort of ended in a laugh, because nobody really cared. The one that did it the best way, that I really, really liked, was Walter from North Carolina, when he switched from being a hawk over there, and that to me was miraculous, and there were a few like that would come and sit down and ask questions. And Leonard Reed was one that taught me. He says, don't go and try to bulldozer your way in and say this is the way it's going to be. Yeah. Wait until they ask you a question.
I like that. I like that. It means they're ready to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it means they're ready to learn. So sometimes people just get defensive, and this probably is a great way to, when people want to learn something, they actually want to listen, then they're going to ask questions.
Right.
Like that. Israel is a big controversial topic right now on the left and on the right. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on our relationship with Israel, Congress and the Senate. What is our relationship with Israel? And does Israel have a deep state?
I think the whole thing is a deep state, for 3 or 4 or 5 generations. And I do believe that one of the motivating philosophic problems would be the Zionism, where they introduce religion into it, and they put a guilt trip on you. If you don't go along with that, you're rejecting, if you happen to be a Christian, you're rejecting your religion. And that to me is a big problem, because not all Christians agree with those people who use the ideas of Zionism, that this is God ordained.
Right.
That is a big problem, and to deal with it in a philosophic and a theological way, by trying to influence people and change their mind, is very, very difficult and important. But religion is a very emotional subject, and yet I think that's one of the biggest problems. And of course, there's divisions over in the Eastern world, Middle East, and the rest. They don't agree with all Islam's. People who believe in Islam, they don't all agree. It's a human nature thing. But for us here, and how we follow this it's a thing that support comes from that. So you have people that are very libertarian leaning and like to vote against the spending and to have these ideas that they agree with us on, but they always there's always an exception, and it's a religious. It becomes out for some of them is strictly a religious belief. So I in a personal life I have to deal with that at all, but I have to. If people ask me an honest question, I would try to explain exactly what I'm talking about.
I love that. Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it. It's been such a dividing, strange line. And I think a lot of Christians, I'm a Christian, I think a lot of Christians kind of they confuse, I think, that the gathering of Israel with the location, geography of Israel and all that goes with it. And it's hard. I think it's really hard for people to understand. I don't think they invest enough time learning.
Right.
Yeah. Now, in this first year of the presidency of the second round of Trump, we're looking at Venezuela and talking about taking Greenland and talking about Cuba and talking about Iran and talking about Canada. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that through a lot of treaty deals, not treaty deals, but the USMCA and all of those kinds of deals, we're fastly turning into a region.
I don't think you mentioned the very great success of Ukraine.
Oh, yes.
No, I just don't know why people, the people that endorse this in a religious, patriotic fashion. This is excitement, they
I know
living this thing, and that just gives them more energy. That's why people's minds have to be changed. And the best example I can use on people changing their minds was how we were indoctrinated about how we should react to COVID. And and the government was so organized against that, and they used it as doing all that evil stuff. And yet that was when the people woke up, and there were good doctors that lost their jobs and all, and so they confronted it, and it didn't take. Now when you let things slip out of control, like Afghanistan or Iraq or Venezuela and all these places, it's harder to stop them. And to stop our intervention in the Middle East, I'm not optimistic and say it could end, but I'm optimistic to say that more and more people, even the polls are starting to show it, and that there's a hope with the younger generation who are saying, why are we spending all this money? And if they understand that they're spending people's money, and this is a moral issue, how do they do this? They're talking about $50 billion more. I said, that's money they're stealing from. From us. You can't steal and take money from people just because you need it or want to cause trouble. But I like to use that because I really put it in the category of theft, when you can use the government force. And I think Bastiat said it right. If you and I can't do it, and it's wrong for us to steal and kill and rob and all, then why is it that we tolerate it when the government does it, and we just lie back and we participate in this game of pure democracy? Just get the gang together, get them 51%, and we can rob the rest of us.
I agree. It has amazed me that people don't even ask the question, why are we in the middle of every single deal, peace deal? It's not really peace, but peace deal, altercation. We're between every country. I mean, no one even asks why we take that role. We have no right to take that role, but we interject ourselves everywhere. So no one even asks the question anymore. Kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of with this whole TSA thing in ICE. And people are saying, well, I like ICE better than TSA. And I'm thinking, well, both have absolutely zero constitutional authority to be doing what they're doing, but no one's saying that. So
no, and they talk about a right to do it.
Yeah.
And they do, you say and suggest, and I agree, that they don't have a right to do it, but they have convinced themselves, for the most part, they're decent people wanting to do the right thing. They get talked into the patriotism and the religion, and they satisfy them in a religious way. They satisfy themselves in the patriotic way, because if you don't vote, once the president gets us involved, and Congress, starts to fund them, then you can't stop because they have voted to endorse the war, by sending the money. So, but if they saw this in a form of theft, they have to steal the money to do all these bad things, and then they'll say, "What do you mean bad things? But we care about the poor, but you don't do a good job." There's, if you want prosperity, you have to look at history and find out the freer a country is, the more prosperity and the more peace there is. I'm so convinced of that. They ought to try it once in a while.
Yes. And whenever we're in war, never approved by Congress, of course, but whenever we're in war, it seems like we lose more liberty than ever, and our economy is always in shambles.
Boy, that's for sure, because there is a cost.
Yeah.
And now they pretend there is no cost. And that's why I have spent a good bit of time, and really was the number one motivation when I ran for Congress way back in the early 70s. It had to do with the money issue. And I saw this as the gimmick that they could use. And yes, they still would tax, but this taxing by diluting the value of the money is a neat little trick, because if they can take away, if you have a savings of $100,000 and they have you an inflation rate of 50%, they've just stolen half of your money, and they didn't even have to send the IRS agents after you. And yet, that's one thing that I think we've made some progress on, because in the 60s, people would come up to me and say, "What in the world are you talking about?" Nobody ever talked about the Federal Reserve. But now I think that it's almost in regular news there, and they fight out in open. Who knows best, as the president or the chairman of the Federal Reserve? Who knows what the interest rate should be? And they're serious about picking and showing, "Oh, because you could go down a little bit, up a little bit." Well, maybe they should mind their own business, let the market decide it, and maybe that's the problem. So that is the way they finance it. But that's the way the empires have usually, annihilated themselves, because they would go to inflation. Even the Roman Empire did this, and they destroy the currency, and then that empire ends, and they start all over. So really, the big question right now: are we witnessing, an empire which we've denied that we are a participant in? Now it looks like it's the last hurrah. I mean, talking to American people, a lot of American people say, "I think that sounds like a good idea. We ought to own Greenland." I mean, well, why don't you just go on vacation up there and help the people up there? Well, anyway, it's so good. Common sense is on our side, so I don't know why we're not doing better on winning over the support of a lot more people.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? We're talking about the economy too a little bit, and most people don't realize that only 10% of our oil comes through that strait. And so we're acting like every drop of oil we get is coming through and from Iran, and it's not. And so we're very uneducated in this, but also I have felt like the economy, it was this sudden war with the timing that was very strange for Iran. It seemed like it's like kind of a scapegoat for making sure the economy stays like this and even gets worse. What are your thoughts on the economy, on the coming economy, and how long does this last?
Well, I think the cause of the next recession or depression is already in place. You can't say, well, we don't want to have this recession coming. That's what they're arguing about. They think they can tinker with interest rates and prevent the recession, because and so they keep thinking that they can handle this. No, I think it's locked in place. It started, back in 2008 when they take interest rates to zero for 5 years, and it was like free money. And that does, it creates a lot of debt, government debt, and everybody else makes debt, and a lot of mistakes, malinvestment, too much investment in certain area. Who knows? There's a lot of money being spent. Well, one malinvestment would be the DOD. But what about all the other electronic, the good stuff coming out? And they do need money, but it would go at a more natural, secure way if you did it by using money that had to be saved by somebody, and it should be handled in a different way. But now we have the debt, we have the malinvestment, and we know we have to rebuild. You just can't turn the switch on and say, we've canceled that out. No, it's starting to get canceled out, and that's going to be the tough times. But I think a lot of people are already having tough times right now, and yet they come like blindly. Oh, we don't have enough money. They want another $50 billion this week. Just goes on, and it's all money down a drain, except for the people who are going to make the money off the war, the munitions and weapons industry.
You know what? We usually get a few Looney Tunes on YouTube, and today it's no different. But we have one guy, Geoffrey, who says that you guys are dumb. War stimulates the economy. Do you want to address that?
I didn't quite get the sentence to say that again.
He said we're stupid because war stimulates the economy.
Well, there's a lot of explanations. I think it's all based on people's ignorance that has been ingrained in our system. Ingrained in our system, and that's been there for it's over 100 years, and that's at the university. So I'm delighted when the universities are dashed down a bit, because they perpetuated this, and that's why I'm so interested in homeschooling and private schooling, to try to people escape that. I told somebody once that I had all that schooling, I liked history and all that. I said, when I discovered Austrian economics, I said I had to take a long time to unlearn all the things that the government taught me. And it's the way it is, and you have to challenge the status quo, and it's but it's in spite of it all, I think people, when they have the right information, if they do what we're talking about and what is going on, people would say, yes, I'd rather live in a free society.
Yes, and we're getting liberty robbed, and spying hasn't stopped, and it's only increasing. We've got a lot of problems right here at home, and that are not getting erased with all the drama happening around us. A couple of comments coming in are, Ron, you should have been commander in chief. I agree, and also Putin is not as bad as everyone is saying, and we're not allowed to say that. What are your thoughts on Russia?
On Russia? Well. I sort of lived through the Cold War. I was drafted in the '60s, and we had missiles in Cuba, and then the whole Soviet system broke down. That was an example of a major system that broke down because they were spread too thin. They spent it on weaponry, and it collapsed. I thought it was a wonderful example of what happened was self-destructed, because through the '60s, everybody was trying to dig a hole and hide from the nukes coming to get us all. Right. So I think it was wonderful, and then what followed, after the Cold War ended, I think was wonderful, and there was a lot of good things done. But in the last 5 years, there's in Europe and the trade that Russia had, even now, we have sanctions on Russia and all that stuff. I thought it was just interesting. And we came up last week. We had to announce, our prices of oil is going up. This released the sanctions on Russia. Let them sell us more oil. I mean, that's how ridiculous the whole thing is. But anyway, I was disappointed. I was happy when the end of the Cold War ended. I was happy with what was the move in the right direction. But right now, I think that we don't need to start a fight with Russia. I mean, yes, I think there's every reason that in the world you could justify maybe a little better relationships with Russia.
Yeah, it always seems like we have to have a big fear game in order for them to take liberty, right? So it's all based on fear. So
and spend more money defending our freedoms.
Yes. Yeah. So how long do you think this lasts with Iran?
What do you think? The war?
Mm-hmm.
I think, it started in 1953.
That's the truth. Oh my!
It had to do with Eisenhower and the British.
Yep.
It was over oil.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they had a break for a while,
Mhm.
I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Right.
We've dug too many holes, and it's going to give an opportunity as we are spread too thin. Other people are going to feel their oats, and just because they have played ball with our government because we have a lot of clout, I think there's a lot of governments and systems out there that are very annoyed with us throwing our weight around, and I think
Yes.
that means it's going to last a much longer time, and hopefully we have another breakthrough where we decide that maybe we ought to settle this down and quit fighting these wars, hot wars or cold wars, and just turn it over to a country that loves freedom and liberty and sound money.
Yeah, we sure have had a lot of wars and rumors of wars going on for decades and decades and decades. And I think you're so right about that. And also, I just wanted to mention your website. If you, to actually learn truth, youtube.com/ the Ron Paul Liberty Report. But I did want to ask you a question. You are in your 90s now. Yes?
Let's just say I can't remember.
I love that answer. And looking back, who
Yeah, I think I confessed they had a party for me last year. And,
that's a good indication. So who was your biggest influence in understanding correct principles of governing? Who's been your biggest influence?
well, there are quite a few, but I often, when I have to come up with a name over the years, I've generally come up with Leonard Reed, who started and ran the Foundation for Education,
Yeah.
fee,
Mhm.
and he was philosophic. He was a libertarian.
Mhm.
I got to know him real well,
Mhm.
and what I learned from him was demeanor. On how you're supposed to talk to people.
Right, right.
so, so I always we talked about it earlier about when you're reaching somebody, to have somebody to sit down beside you and say, I want to ask you a serious question. And that
Yeah.
happened. It happened when I was in Congress 2 or 3 times.
Wow. I love that. I love that you got that kind of advice. Were your parents instrumental? Were your parents political?
Only in the way they lived their lives,
Oh,
and
neat.
they didn't go to college,
Mhm.
and they worked hard. Contribution probably was the work ethic, because my dad probably would have been arrested because we had a little dairy and we had bottled that had to be hand washed, and then we sold. That was back when my dad delivered milk at one time in a horse and buggy.
Mhm.
So, but when I was 5, I was able to be the inspector. There was a bottler that was automatically fill the bottle, and my job was to pick up the bottle, turn
Mhm.
around and make sure there's no dirt in the bottle. And the motivation was, if I found a dirty bottle, I got a penny.
I
So,
really, I
and
love
believe it
this.
or not, I was able to save money.
I love this. You had parents of great character, taught you how to work.
Pardon?
Yes. Yeah, taught you how to work. Your parents
Yeah,
taught you how to work. A lot of
working
character.
all along, and
I
I
like
think
that.
that was very helpful. And
Mhm.
of course, we went to a Lutheran church, and
Mhm.
my parents had met in Luther League, which was 2 different Lutheran churches, and they were all very, very active in the church.
I love that. That's wonderful. I love that. I love that upbringing. And then when did you kind of clue into the right-left paradigm, the lie that is, as far as, I think the agenda goals roll on while we are divided by right-left paradigms. When did you finally realize that?
Well, I think I was born with the instinct.
Yes. Yeah.
I think
Truth
most of them are
instinct.
born with the instinct, but
Yeah.
they try to hammer it out with you. But
Mhm.
when I got involved and more interested through the monetary issue. I was a coin collector as a kid. We delivered milk and delivered papers and all this. So I went through all the coin. That was when I should tell you how old I am. We had silver in our money. So I would, yeah, as the silver was
Actual
disappearing,
silver.
I was taking the silver out. I knew about money. So,
I love that.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. You've had a really wonderful career, and I really commend you and just honor you for waking people up and asking the questions that are very uncomfortable, because it's really hard to do. You don't become popular that way. The truth always lies in the minority, and I really appreciate all the work you're doing, and even still through the podcast and the Ron Paul Liberty Report, you're doing fantastic work educating.
Well, that's what we try to do, and that's where I think the real action is. So, and that's available to us, in spite of the shortcomings of the internet. The internet has been fantastic, you know,
Mm,
reaching people.
yeah.
Number because when I got interested in the monetary issues and libertarianism, I would go to the colleges, because every college had 6 or 8 or 10, 15 libertarians. I would go and I'd get 12 or 15 people to come out.
Really?
And I thought that was wonderful,
Yeah.
but I never dreamed there would be a day that I got more than 15 people. And on a few occasions, we were able to do that in the presidential campaigns.
Oh, I love that. I wish people would understand that a lot of people have hope that government's going to save us. I don't. I have hope that the people will finally wake up, enough of them. It doesn't take everybody, right? But I think the people are going to have to turn this boat around, and I don't think government will. Your thought on that?
That's right. And they do. You got to get a consensus, and
Mhm.
you got to get people going in the right direction. But you have to have leadership. You know, when COVID, the attitude switched, it was because a few good scientists and doctors spoke out,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
they got the message out. So the average person never got that far, but all of a sudden, the people who were rebelling against it, they were making sense. Then all of a sudden the mothers and the fathers who
Mhm.
were upset with it all went to the meetings, the school board meeting.
Right.
So, I still think you have to have leadership
Mhm.
with an idea. That's the way the founding of this country occurred. I've
Mhm.
I've been very fascinated with the education of the founders, and I don't know where they get the books. They didn't even have an internet, and they
Right?
reviewed, and they did real well. But they never went to a government school.
That is true. Nor did they have the nightly news, which I feel like the nightly news was an adult education course that we signed up for in life, but we never knew we were signing up for the brainwashing of the nightly news. So I feel like it's just been brainwashing upon brainwashing,
Right.
right?
That's
Oh,
it.
anyway, I so appreciate you. Thank you, Dr. Ron Paul, for joining me. It was great, and I really appreciate all the visits to my show. So thank you so much for that.
Great. It has been very nice to be with you.
Thank you. All right, you guys. Appreciate you guys tuning in for this special interview, and we'll see you next time. Well, we'll see you later today.